Komi Can't Communicate. I know, the guy who talks about Japanese cartoons to random strangers on the internet isn't exactly the epitome of social intelligence. Nevertheless, I was made aware of Tomohito Oda's Komi Can't Communicate during one of my many manga trips to Barnes & Noble's, where I would check in both directions to make sure that I wouldn't come too uncomfortably close to another human being during my comic shopping. The series, now with an anime adaptation by Studio OLM, is about the titular Shoko Komi, Itan Private High School's object of desire and envy, who suffers from debilitating social anxiety, limiting her to communication only in written form. Eventually, she stumbles upon Hitohito Tadano, a regular, everyday, run-of-the-mill schlub whose name is literally a play on Tadai no Hito, or ordinary or average person. Together, they embark on a quest to not only find the solution to Komi's predicament, but make 100 friends along the way. While my days in high school were spent hiding in the back of the library binging volumes of Bleach despite the librarian's ire, adulthood forced me to talk to others in sentences that don't begin with, "You know, the interesting thing about this anime is?" Social anxiety isn't just a switch one turns off and on. Komi Can't Communicate is an anime that appears on the surface to be a hilarious and masterfully executed comedic romp, but beneath the exterior has a message for each of us. From the Shinji Akaris to the Lelouch V. Britannias of the world, we can learn about what it means to speak to each other. But let's start off with the foundation of Komi Can't Communicate's strength, its brilliant approach toward its humor. A warning though, this video will contain spoilers for about 2 volumes or so, or 6 episodes if such a thing matters to you. Core to the brilliant writing of Komi is a distinction between what I'll call minimalist and maximalist humor. Extremely fast-paced, frantic changes in mood serve as the traditional comedy anime breadwinner. This is dolloped heavily into the script of episode 1, painting a picture of Komi's world as reckless and frenzied, breaking out into literal celebration at merely nothing more than Komi writing on the wall. Characters like Agati, the avatar of Makima Sims everywhere, desiring to be Komi's personal dog drooling at her feet. Or Yamai, the series token yandere, who literally locks dear Tadano in a closet in order to get closer to the class princess. These foils to Komi's silent personality amplify the humor past mere, "Hey, look at these funny anime characters being silly." Even Komi participates, with one of the best gags in the anime being the way she scuttles and scurries at the very thought of confrontation. And of course, you all would crucify me if I didn't bring up Komi's signature public breakdowns where she starts speaking in unholy tongues. But the real magic of Komi Can't Communicate is how the traditional anime whimsy is contrasted with a more minimalist humor. No second is wasted in this anime, with almost all dead air being filled with some sort of visual or even non-visual gag. Komi being, and get this, unable to communicate requires Tomohiko Oda to communicate their thoughts and feelings through some other means. In episode 2, Tadano has a pretty serious conversation with Osana, a non-binary classmate, about gender identity. And up pops a text box simply pointing to Komi, informing us that she's still petrified in shock from an earlier conversation. Only briefly, our attention is pulled away from a gag, not only lightening the tense mood, but continuing to characterize the difficulty that Komi faces in nothing more than a background shot. The joke isn't shoved at our face, the humor is merely in the inference. It's the contrast between the absurdity of how the class views Komi and Asana's heart-to-heart with Tadano. Overall, Komi fully understands the principle of show, don't tell. Some jokes are obvious, and most are merely inferred, building a picture of who Komi is without even saying a word. Like when she first opens her brand new phone and starts to pretend what it would be like to have a conversation. Absent dialogue, we're given a humorous scene that begs a chuckle, but clearly gets across that Komi doesn't want silence. What she wants is to communicate. But at the end of the day, no amount of brilliant writing can make up for a lazy adaptation, as we've learned quite well this past year. And director Ayume Watanabe has not only created an anime faithful to Komi Can't Communicate, but has built a golden idol and declared themselves a shining paladin to Oda's original work. OLM has gone beyond the Call of Duty to recruit some of the industry's greatest creators for a rom-com series that any other studio would have just gone to the bargain bin for. Of note is episode 1's director Atsuko Nakaima, who's created a cinematic-like experience for the big reveal of Komi and Tadano's chalkboard scene. Already a bitingly emotional moment in the manga, it was truly brought to life by the genius of legendary director and photographer Toma Namiki. But an animation is nothing without the actual animators, and Komi puts nearly everything else in the genre to shame. Hayato Toi, most known for his work on Inazuma 11, is responsible for nearly every cut of Sakuga I've already mentioned in this video. From the shot of Komi writing her name to the signature signature cut and run, Toei has injected an eccentric personality not present in the source material. Music director Yukari Hashimoto is no stranger to comedy and romance, having done the score on dozens of series, most notably March Comes In Like a Lion and Toradora. Her arrangements are wonderful, no doubt, but the real utility of Yukari's work is just how masterfully it's used to reinforce the minimalist and maximalist dichotomy I mentioned before. For example, in episode 2, Komi is tasked with obtaining a complete Starbucks order for Osana to practice speaking. When she first enters, she's filled with the serene sounds of the bougie lifestyles she's shunned and promptly chickens out. When she returns, the exact same track is played again from the exact same point, which comes off as hilarious, no doubt, but also emphasizes the continuous struggle that Komi faces. Agari's deep fantasies about the possibility of her existence being acknowledged by Komi are given an orchestrated, serene tone, only to be instantly cut by the reality of what the class thinks of her. Music shouldn't merely be used as a way to fill air or establish a vibe for a scene, but used to tell the story itself, something that Hashimoto so evidently understands. All of these aspects of the technical strengths of Komi Can't Communicate serve as a foundation to the anime's competency as an adaptation in general. Many anime see their goal as merely putting page to screen, or even worse, okay, I'm not going to subject you to those again. Watanabe understands that a manga like this one requires more than a little extra care. Most of the manga's panels are thin rectangles and often filled to the absolute brim with boxes of ancillary text. But the anime handles this more than gracefully, like the Starbucks scene where the box itself follows her movements forward rather than being a static image. In episode 3, where Komi attempts to ask for Agari's number, we're held on a static frame of her petrified face before finally offering her phone, thus perfectly simulating the dead air given off by just these two panels. Or the word game that Komi plays with her classmates before being just a series of simple boxes is given the Studio Trigger treatment and transformed into an all-out spectacle. That wasn't a clever metaphor, by the way. Most of the in-between animation for Komi is in fact done by Trigger. Nevertheless, the anime is a masterclass in animation, not being content with just being true to the manga, but also taking one step forward. In being true to the source, however, Komi Can't Communicate has created an avenue for the manga's central message to shine through. On the surface, Komi is a comedy about a girl's inability to connect with the outside world. But as I said before, social anxiety is not just a switch that's either off or on. It's a spectrum, a lingering specter we all have to deal with. It's because of this that the most important character in Komi Can't Communicate is not Komi, but Tadano. He's your average guy, hell, his name is quite literally average, and is able to perform basic day-to-day functions that Komi cannot. But even with the ability to communicate, Tadano often lacks the ability to connect. Avoiding eye contact, fearing the judgment of others is a trait that seems obvious for Komi, but Tadano is unable to look Komi in the eye when asking for her number. The mangaka confirms this in an interview, saying, "Usually I'm like Tadano, but when meeting someone for the first time, I'm more like Komi." While Komi represents the struggle we face at the worst of times, Tadano is instead the struggle that we feel in everyday life. Even the most outspoken and extroverted of us can't be at the top of our game every day of the week. And like the mangaka, we often find ourselves like Tadano, fighting our inner Komi. However, unlike Komi, most of the barriers to connecting lies in the quirks that make us unique, but at the same time, isolate us from others. Komi's belief, the idea that she must overcome to be able to communicate, is that everyone around her is a perfect social butterfly, social anxiety switch turned off. But indeed, each and every character that Oda writes to become one of Komi's 100 friends feels detached in some way from the world around them. Asana, for their whole life, was loved by everyone they met, but gave up on Komi when, for the first time, they felt rejection. For Agari, we're told that if someone even looks at her, she blushes and goes into convulsions. Even the yandere Yamai has to come to terms with how her homicidal desire for Komi masks her more basic aspirations for companionship. Through these weaknesses, Komi is able to learn that everyone has something to overcome, something that makes them feel alone. But it's exactly this that Komi Can't Communicate has to teach each and every one of us, that we often don't relate to others through our best and most agreeable features. And those we often see from the outside as living the perfect social life also fight things we cannot necessarily see. The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows calls this realization, this idea that people live lives as complex and interesting as the rest of us, Sonder. We are not the most interesting beings in the universe, and accepting that and choosing not just to learn about the eccentricities of others, but connect with them is how others can connect with us. So many of the hobbies and interests I've picked up over the years, I only could because I allowed others to share those parts of themselves. I allowed others to open up to me, and in turn, was able to open up to them. Komi Can't Communicate is another example of an anime that seems to be about so little, but through its lighthearted quirkiness and its willingness to have fun with itself, that it's able to say more than many other anime that just scream their message through unbearable grimdarkness. Tomohito Oda's manga was already a smash hit, selling well over 5 million copies as the beginning of the year. And frankly, even a low-effort, throwaway rom-com adaptation that most people expect would probably have satisfied fans. But OLM has gone the extra step and created a truly exceptional anime that easily puts it near the top of the season. Whether or not you just watch for the laughs or the wholesomeness or for whatever pseudo-therapeutic nonsense I spouted in the last couple minutes, Komi Can't Communicate is a series that should be tried by everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. If you made it this far, thanks kings, queens, and everyone in between. The fall video took a lot out of me, so I took a little bit of a break. I'll be putting out more content going forward. If you want to know what I'm working on next, consider joining the Discord or supporting me on Patreon. Okay, peace for real this time.